Okay, here's some feedback to try and improve your answer to make it as good as what you possibly can, and hopefully a level 4 answer to getting as close to 20 marks as possible. Right, first thing I've done is broke the question down into its two parts. Okay, the first part is up here, where what you're having to look to do is you must choose a competitive match, like a football match, and then explain when and why a performer uses lactic acid and the aerobic energy system. Now, as you can see from the mark scheme here below, it is not giving you any credit at all for explaining how the lactic acid and aerobic energy system actually works. So you don't have to start with to go into any great detail of explaining about glycolysis, about the 3 stages of the aerobic system, like Krebs, electron transport chain. You're wasting your time if you're doing that. All it wants you to do is emphasise that during a game, you have a mix of all 3 systems. And at any one point, one can be predominant. What it depends upon is intensity and duration. And then below here, it gives you some information about what a high intensity activity would look like using the lactic acid system. And then one would look like for a medium or low intensity exercise using the aerobic energy system. So can you just check your answer and see if you included those things? Okay, next, the second half of the question, and this is where you've got to get your balance with your 20 markers, is looking at, first of all, the fuels used in each of those systems, and then going on to looking at things like levels of aerobic fitness, availability of oxygen, and availability of fuels. If I start at the top here with the fuels used, there's those 2 key words again, of duration and intensity. And what you've got to do here is link, and this is the only part where you have to start talking about how each system breaks down a fuel. Tell me in a high intensity activity how we break down carbs, and then expand on a low intensity activity during a game where you use the aerobic system, how we break down fats and carbs. Final part of the question, where you've got to get a balance, so you need to include some aspects here, and to be honest with you, quite a few of you did do this, is look here where it talks about first of all the level of aerobic fitness. So the more aerobically fit you are, the more you can use the aerobic energy system. Now you need to make an emphasis on that, because remember, the aerobic energy system is the most efficient out of the 2. Why? Well, because it produces the most ATP. Onto this area of availability of oxygen, you need to establish here that the greater the level of aerobic fitness, the more available oxygen the performer can use. So this is where you talk about a fitter performer having a larger lungs, larger heart, therefore giving a greater working supply to the muscles. Finally, this availability of fuels. You've got to compare here the use of glycogen and the use of fats. Now, the fitter the performer, the earlier they can start to use fats as a fuel. And remember, fat is a more efficient fuel than glycogen, and if you can use fat as a fuel, you will delay OBLA longer. Alright? Have a little look at that. Please try and distinguish between the fact that the fuel is really important in terms of using fat as opposed to glucose, and the fitter performer can turn to fats quicker, therefore allowing them to use the aerobic energy system longer. Okay?